Hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Jeanine Scheffert, and I am the Senior Manager of Philanthropy Events here at Food and Water Watch, and your host for Livable Future Live, our monthly event series. As people are joining, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to see your name, where you're joining us from, and what brings you here today. For any of you new to Food and Water Watch, welcome. We are a national organization fighting for safe food, clean water, and a livable climate for all. We organize for grassroots activism at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, and we work to create the change and the solutions we need. For any of you new to Livable Future Live, welcome. This is our monthly virtual education series. Each month, we focus on a different topic relative to our livable future. I'm excited to be starting 2026 with our special Book of the Year event. At the end of every year, our executive director, Wenonah Hauter, takes a look back and chooses the book that stood out to her as the most memorable, the most thought-provoking, and the most timely book she read. And for 2025, that was The Problem with Plastic: How We Can Save Ourselves and Our Planet Before It's Too Late by Judith Enck. We're honored today to be joined by Judith Enck. And in a few minutes, Judith and Wenonah will be diving into a discussion of this book. Before we get started, I'll just go over a few Zoom reminders and announcements of upcoming events. First, a few quick notes about Zoom. If you would like to turn on closed captioning to add subtitles to your screen, click Show Captions in your Zoom toolbar, and we'll add instructions for that in the chat as well. Please use this chat box throughout the evening to share your thoughts and your reactions to what you're hearing. The chat is also where we will share information and links, so keep an eye out for those. As you see in this slide, there is a separate icon to click for typing questions you want to ask Judith today. So the chat box is for talking to other attendees and sharing and receiving information, and the Q&A box is to ask questions directly to Judith. And we have set aside time near the end for audience Q&A, and I will get to as many of your questions as possible. And finally, I am recording this event, and I will share the recording with you tomorrow in an email that I will send out. We all know that the past year under a Trump presidency has been a challenge, and we all know that we have big challenges ahead of us. But here at Food and Water Watch, we have a history of winning, and we are prepared to defend the strides we've made and to continue to take on factory farms, protect our water from toxic chemicals, fight for a future free of fossil fuels, and stand up against corporate climate scams. We've put together a list of our top priorities for the upcoming year, and next month, on Wednesday, February 18th, we'll host a discussion of these priorities. So please make sure to follow the link in the chat to sign up for that event, and go ahead and submit your questions in advance. As I said, Food and Water Watch has a history of winning and a plan for moving forward, but it takes all of us to make it happen. There are many ways for you to get involved with our work, whether that's joining our volunteer network, attending events like you are right now, or making a donation. Thank you so much for being here, for showing up, and for your generosity. We don't take corporate funding, so we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you. So thank you so much for contributing to the work we're all doing together. I want to take one more moment before we get started to acknowledge that we are coming together in community today with a diverse set of backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences, but with a common belief in the importance of fighting for clean water, clean food, and a livable future for all. As you share your thoughts and questions in the comments, please make sure to keep them respectful. We do have someone monitoring the chat, and we'll ask anyone not abiding by this request to leave the event. And with that, let's begin our discussion. As I've mentioned, tonight we're going to hear from Judith Enck, president of Beyond Plastics and author of The Problem with Plastic: How We Can Save Ourselves and Our Planet Before It's Too Late. And as I said, every year, Food and Water Watch Executive Director Wenonah Hauter chooses a book of the year. And The Problem with Plastic is her 2025 selection. This book highlights one of the biggest issues of our time. We've all heard how pervasive plastics are and the microplastics they break down into, and how likely all of us have plastic running through our veins. It's terrifying. This book explores the history of plastic, the true cost of plastic's entire life cycle, and how this crisis was created as a deliberate result of an alliance between fossil fuel, chemical, and plastics companies, regardless of the consequences for public health or the environment. And like so many environmental crises, by design, people of low income and communities of color bear the heaviest burden of the plastics crisis. This topic is heavy, but we are excited that Judith could join us this evening so that she and Wenonah can talk about this book and what can be done to combat this crisis. Please allow me to introduce Wenonah and Judith. Wenonah Hauter is the Executive Director of Food and Water Watch, which she founded 21 years ago in 2005 to channel the power of grassroots activism to fight for a future with clean, affordable water, sustainable food, and a livable climate. She has over 3 decades of experience organizing, and she is the author of books Frackopoly and Foodopoly. Judith Enck is the founder and president of Beyond Plastics, whose goal is to eliminate plastic pollution everywhere. In 2009, she was appointed by President Obama to serve as regional administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and served as Deputy Secretary for the Environment in the New York Governor's Office. She is currently a professor at Bennington College, where she teaches classes on plastic pollution. Please join me in welcoming Wenonah and Judith. And Wenonah, I'll let you take it from here, and I will see you all again near the end when we get to those audience questions.
Thanks, Jeanine. And Judith, thank you for being here tonight. And congratulations on the book. It is so chock full of information. I really enjoyed it, and it's an impressive work. So, for people who haven't had a chance to read your book yet, can you outline the full life cycle of single-use plastic, from oil and fracked gas wells to pipelines, petrochemical facilities, and then to incineration?
Sure. But first, Wenonah, thank you for picking the book. I'm a co-author with Adam Mahoney, a very talented journalist from New Orleans. And it means a lot that you pick this book, more important than, say, Amazon. But we're both our organizations are really focused on the climate crisis and fossil fuels. And we would not be overwhelmed with so much plastic if not for fracking. So traditionally, plastics were made from chemicals and oil. Now they're made from 16,000 different chemicals and ethane, which is a waste product of hydrofracking. So at hydrofracking sites, typically the waste ethane is vented into the atmosphere. What's happening more recently is new pipelines are being constructed, and that ethane is being transported to new gigantic manufacturing facilities called, not manufacturing facilities quite, but big facilities called ethane crackers, where they heat the ethane at high temperature. It cracks, that's the bizarre name of the facility, and then they create billions of little tiny pieces of plastic called pre-production plastics. And so if not for fracking, we would not be seeing such an increase in the production of plastic. So that's production. And then use of plastic creates major problems for our health, which we'll discuss tonight. And because only 5 to 6% of plastics actually get recycled, that means it is going to landfills, it's getting loose in the environment and getting into the ocean, or it's being burned at garbage incinerators, which are typically located in low-income communities and communities of color, causing serious air pollution problems, particularly when you burn plastic, you get small amounts of dioxin and furans formed. And incineration doesn't eliminate the need for landfills because there's a lot of ash left over. So plastics and fossil fuels are kissing cousins.
So can you say a little bit more about incineration?
Sure. Um, I spent 10 years as a community organizer with New York Public Interest Research Group, NYPIRG, opposing garbage incinerators up and down the Hudson Valley in upstate New York, because incineration is the worst way to handle municipal solid waste. It causes air pollution. The ash can leach into groundwater, and the fly ash is toxic. It undercuts waste reduction and recycling because often local governments are required to sign what's called put or pay contracts, where even if you reduce your waste, you still have to pay for a certain amount going to the facilities. Incineration is expensive and often cited in environmental justice communities. That's why, with only one or two exceptions, we've not seen new incinerators appear in the US in the last 30 years. But the industry is consolidated and they are trying to come back. And in some states, they masquerade as a renewable energy source, which is really troubling because garbage should not be a renewable commodity.
That is for sure. We're familiar with that problem. We've fought incineration as part of renewables in
Yes,
Maryland.
good. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the accident in East Palestine, Ohio. I mean, it is just the poster child for everything wrong with the industry. And it's devastating how it impacts the people who live near the railways necessary for transporting chemicals. So just to remind everybody, in February of 2023, 5 rail cars carrying a total of 116 gallons of toxic human carcinogen used to make PVC spilled and created a huge disaster that people are still living with. I know it impacted our six of our staff who live in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, who are campaigning against fracking, and they live very close to the East Palestine, um, Ohio border. So can you say a little bit more about this?
Yes, and I do recall some of the Food and Water Watch staff from Pennsylvania calling me after this disaster. So the chemical that was was affected here is called vinyl chloride. 99% of this carcinogenic chemical is used to make polyvinyl chloride or PVC plastic, which is used in shower curtains, it's used in packaging, and unfortunately, it's also used in drinking water pipes. So as communities are finally getting rid of lead service lines, we want to make sure that they're not replacing lead pipes with PVC pipes. We have a report on our website, The Perils of PVC Piping. So this vinyl chloride chemical was being transported by Norfolk Southern. The train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, right on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, and that was very bad. And the first responders came, they got the fire out. The first 24 hours, people were evacuated. I don't think the evacuation zone was big enough. I was really paying attention to this because when I served as regional administrator during the Obama administration, we had a vinyl chloride train derailment in New Jersey. And the way we handled that was by the book. So you evacuate where you need to, and then you bring in vacuum trucks to remove the chemical from either the train cars or if it was spilled. What the state of Ohio with I think the consent of the EPA did was entirely wrong. They spilled the vinyl chloride into ditches and then lit it on fire and did an open burn of the vinyl chloride. It was irresponsible. It was dangerous. It was not the way EPA typically handled emergency responses like this. And people living in that immediate community and far beyond are very concerned about the long-term health impacts. Some had immediate health problems. Many today are still struggling. And then, of course, we know with carcinogens, there's a long latency period from when you're exposed and then when an unfortunate cancer may show up 20 or 25 years later. So this was very poorly handled by the state of Ohio, by the rail company, and EPA did not provide the needed oversight to make sure the community was protected. But I want to remind people that every day vinyl chloride is moving all over the country on a rickety rail system in order to make PVC plastic when we have alternatives.
So let's talk a little bit more about the relationship between plastics and the oil and gas companies. Have you found when you're talking to people about the book that they're aware of the relationship between fossil fuels and plastic?
Generally, no. People are surprised when I say the top plastic producer in the country is this little mom and pop company known as ExxonMobil. And then in the book, I explain what's happening in the fossil fuel industry in relation to plastic. So historically, fossil fuel companies made money from transportation fuels and fuels for power generation at power plants. So what's going on in those two sectors? On transportation, we're slowly seeing electric vehicles, electric buses taking off. Too slow, but it's happening and it's going to get better, especially when we improve battery storage and more charging stations, etc. The second big use of fossil fuels is electricity generation. And we're finally seeing small progress on renewables, solar, wind, geothermal, small scale hydro, and then the most important, energy efficiency. So the big dogs at Exxon and Shell and Chevron saw the change in the sector, and they decided their big growth area would be plastics. And that is what they are heavily investing in. And they are subsidized. When you have fossil fuel subsidies, some of this goes toward plastic production.
You know, you talk in the book about the staggering numbers of chemicals in making plastic, as many as 16,000. And many of them are associated with serious health and environmental harms. But a lot of them haven't been studied, and only 1% of them have been classified as non-hazardous. What are the implications of those numbers?
Well, the implications are huge for our health. 16,000 chemicals, in different combinations. Sometimes it's more than one chemical. And we are really concerned about this. We're working on legislation at the state level, which is most advanced in New York, to reduce packaging. And a key provision is that it bans 16 of the most toxic chemicals used in plastic packaging and all packaging. I'm talking about PFAS chemicals, lead, mercury, cadmium, formaldehyde. Today, those chemicals are used for food and beverage packaging. So the one thing I'm really excited about in the New York bill is when we eventually pass it, which I hope will be this year, it will get rid of the entire family of PFAS chemicals, because certainly the focus has been on PFOA and PFOS, but it's a whole family of chemicals. And the chemical connection here is quite significant to plastics.
How much do we actually know about the chemicals in plastic food packaging migrating into our food?
Well, we know that when you heat plastics in your microwave or your kid's cafeteria, you may not even know what's going on there. When plastic gets hot, there's an increased leaching of chemicals. And also when it's being transported, you've got hot soda bottles on a hot summer day in a truck. So hot plastic is, which could be the name of a new rock and roll band, but hot plastic is a particular concern. And, I remember years ago, I will do a true confession here. I would sometimes buy frozen food and put it in the microwave, and I would taste the plastic, right? So I'm very worried when I see advertisements for food. It arrives frozen. You're supposed to put it in the microwave. That is a really bad move, particularly if it's black plastic. So chemicals in plastic are a concern, and as far as I'm concerned, should not be allowed for any food or beverage packaging. And the bill we're working on in New York is so modest. It's just a fraction of the chemicals that are used in packaging.
Yeah, I just think about all that takeout food people are eating. Often the food is being put in a plastic container and heated in a microwave and then given to the customer. It's really
Yeah, people should avoid
shocking.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that a lot of people come to the issue of plastics because they're worried about the health issues. They're worried about their children, their grandchildren. Can you talk about the health impacts of microplastics, what we know and what we don't know?
Sure, we know enough to act, that's for sure. So, I teach a class online on plastic pollution through Bennington College, which, by the way, is open to people around the country. You can audit it. Just go to beyondplastics.org to get the information. The next class starts February 18th. It's 7 weeks in the evening. And when I started teaching the class, I couldn't find a lot on health impacts of plastic. I certainly found information on health damage near plastic production facilities, which we'll talk about. But general public writ large, what are the health impacts? I found a few peer-reviewed scientific studies, but not a lot. That has all changed in the last 2 years. We have scientists who have identified microplastics in various parts of the human body, and I'll tell you where. But I also want to tell you the risk is both just the physicality of having little tiny pieces of microplastics in your body, and every plastic has chemicals in it. So the chemicals are hitchhiking on the microplastics. And worse than microplastics is nanoplastics. Microplastics are 5 millimeters or less, nanoplastics are even smaller. The way you and I get plastics in our body is we breathe it in or we swallow it. So it could be from carpet. It could be from your polyester clothing. It could be from when you get a bottle of soda that's plastic. Every time you turn the lid of the soda bottle or the water bottle, that abrasion may cause microplastics to fall into your beverage. So just in the last few years, there have been peer-reviewed, reputable scientific papers identifying microplastics in our blood, our lungs, our kidney,
Mm.
in the human placenta, both the fetal side and the maternal side, in human breast milk. So our babies are being born be pre-polluted. Microplastics have been found in the testicles. And so, what the plastics industry will often say is, well, yeah, you are finding microplastics in the human body, but you're excreting most of it. What's the worry? You're not excreting all of it, you're excreting some of it. The doctors who seem most concerned are the GI docs and also doctors dealing with fertility of people who are trying to get pregnant. But the chemical and plastics industry can no longer argue that there's no evidence that it's causing harm. There was an important study from the New England Journal of Medicine showing the presence of microplastics in our heart arteries. The microplastics attach to plaque. And if it attaches to plaque, you have an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, or premature death. And then finally, there was a recent study identifying microplastics crossing the blood-brain barrier and contributing to Alzheimer's and neurological disease. Of course, we want more studies, and you want the studies to be replicated, but we now know enough to act. And it's really unfortunate that the federal government is reducing investments in health research. So we're going to be relying on other countries and academic institutions to keep this research going. By the way, on the Beyond Plastics website, we list all of the recent health studies in chronological order. So people can kind of track it that way. And we don't put all the studies up. We look at them very closely, or we have a new science director who reviews them. And if they're peer-reviewed and credible, you'll see them on the top of our webpage. We update it about monthly.
That's really terrific, Judith. I had a follow-up question on microplastics. I think it isn't widely known that microplastics impact soil health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So you go by any farm and you're going to see a lot of black plastic down to control weeds. Um, you drive through Vermont where I teach, and you used to see those giant, iconic balls of hay that painters would paint for years. They're now wrapped in white plastic. And there is a real buildup in agricultural soil. And this is an area that needs much more work. There are some organic farmers who don't want to be using so much plastic, but they feel like there's not easy alternatives. It shouldn't be pesticides or plastic, but that's what they're struggling with right now to control weeds. So this is a tough one. And soil health is so important. We also want to make sure that there's not microplastics in compost that's applied to agricultural soil. And I have a real concern when sludge from municipal waste facilities, often containing PFAS, is spread on agricultural soil. So agricultural soil is sacred, and we've got to stop putting so much microplastics and potentially contaminated sludge on the land where our food is grown.
Absolutely true. So, to turn to another issue, we know that the Trump administration is doing everything possible to stop doing any work on climate change, including trying to prevent the development of renewables. Your book discusses how plastic is responsible for a sixth of industrial carbon dioxide emissions. And we know when plastic breaks up, methane and ethylene are emitted. Can you talk about plastic's impact on our climate?
Sure. People working on climate change are really busy. So I hate to give you all something else to do, but you need to work with us on plastics as well, because plastics is a climate change issue. It's connected to fracking. Disposal can contribute to climate problems. So a couple years ago, I wanted to try to quantify how great a climate risk plastic is. So we published a report in October of 2022. We were one of the first to look at this issue. And the report's called The New Coal, Plastic and Climate Change. We look at production, use, and disposal of plastics. And we found that as of 2020, the US plastics industry was responsible for at least 232 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. What does that mean? That's the equivalent of about 116 coal-fired power plants. So as people are diligently working around the globe to shut down coal plants, we're replacing at least some of those emissions with greenhouse gases from plastics, and that has to stop.
Yes. So it's important to talk about the plastic crisis, not only as a health and environmental issue, but also as an environmental justice issue. And I think your book does a terrific job of this. Can you talk a little bit about Cancer Alley, how it came to be and what it has to do with cancer? I mean,
Yes,
with plastic.
yes, and cancer.
Yeah.
Um, well, most plastic is manufactured in Louisiana, Texas, and Appalachia. And particularly, there's an 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge that's been known as Cancer Alley because of the concentration of petrochemical facilities, including many that produce plastic. And it's making people sick because you have so much pollution coming um, from discharge pipes into the river, from smokestacks, building up in the soil. And in the book, we profile a number of women who are leading the charge against plastic production and who are winning. Women like Sharon Levine with Rise St. James, Louisiana, women like Diane Wilson from Texas. And if I could just take a moment, I want to read the dedication of this book. By design, low-income people and communities of color bear the burden of plastics. The destructive web of plastics gathers in their neighborhoods, rivers, air, and bodies. We dedicate this book to those living in the shadow of plastics facilities in Louisiana, Texas, Appalachia, and elsewhere, in the sincere belief that they should live in a world beyond plastics and that such a world is within our reach. We dedicate this book to those people living in those communities first because a recent study by Johns Hopkins found that the cancer rate in Cancer Alley is 7 times the national average. And I was so grateful to co-author the book with a young journalist from New Orleans named Adam Mahoney. And he made sure that environmental justice wasn't just a chapter in the book, but that's integrated into every part of the narrative in the book. So thanks to Adam. And he's a really smart, up and coming environmental journalist who you should all keep your eye on. But I firmly believe in my entire career, both inside and outside government, has been focused on the fact that our zip code should not dictate our health. And I am really concerned about people living near plastic production facilities having to sacrifice their health. It's not just cancer, it's also respiratory disease, cardiac disease, not getting access to reliable, affordable health care, which of course changed even a couple of weeks ago with Congress unwilling to fully extend Obamacare. This is really serious. So health impacts for all of us, but particularly people living in environmental justice communities.
Yeah, it's such a travesty. So let's talk about oceans. Plastics were dumped in the ocean for a long time, and it was supposed to stop when it was outlawed in 1989. But I found it really shocking that you say as much as 2.4 million tons of plastic reach our oceans each year. I mean, that's the equivalent of 2 garbage trucks worth of plastic every single minute. How does How did this happen?
Most of the plastic in the ocean is from the land. So you're walking down the street and you have, God forbid, a single-use plastic water bottle in your hand and it gets away from you. And it's littered, or a plastic bag is littered, and it rains. It gets into storm drains, which drain into streams and rivers, and every river winds up in the ocean. So let's stick with our plastic water bottle. Let's say it's from Nestle, just picking on one company. Um, it's out in the ocean. It's exposed to sunlight. It gets very brittle, breaks into different pieces because the wave action acts almost like a paper cutter. So one plastic water bottle can become hundreds or thousands of pieces of plastic. Now let's remember 71% of the Earth's surface is the ocean. And that will mean that these little microplastics will show up in marine life. Most don't just stay on the surface of the water. We've all seen the photos of the plastic islands called gyres. It's a little misleading. They do exist, some of them the size of Texas, but most of the plastic in the ocean falls to the seafloor, meaning you really can't get it back. And it builds up in fish, seabirds, uh, sea turtles, and many parts of the world rely on fish caught from the ocean as the major source of protein.
Yeah.
So when you're eating that fish, you're also eating microplastics, if in fact the fish has microplastics in it, and many do.
So some of the largest and most powerful creators of plastic waste spend millions of dollars on campaigns trying to shift the blame for plastic pollution away from themselves and onto individual consumers and all sorts of false solutions. Can you discuss some of these false solutions we should be aware of?
Sure. Well, one is plastics recycling. So we should all keep recycling our paper, metal, cardboard, keep composting your yard waste and food waste. But we need a reckoning when it comes to plastics recycling. I wrote an article in The Atlantic a couple years ago, before The Atlantic was so cool. Um, and the title was Plastics Recycling Has Never Worked and Never Will. And I got very little pushback on it because it's true. Um, and I want to explain to everyone why plastics recycling doesn't work mostly. It does work for soda bottles in bottle bill states, but we do have a concern about microplastics from even conventional recycling. But if you have an aluminum can, you can recycle that into a new aluminum can. If you've got the Washington Post, bad example. If you've got the Albany Times-Union, you can recycle that into another paper product or a cardboard box. It doesn't work that way with plastics recycling. There are too many different colors, too many different plastic types known as polymers, and too many different chemicals. So think of your own home. You might have a bright orange hard plastic detergent bottle near your washing machine. And then in your kitchen, you might have a film plastic bread bag. And then you might have a black plastic food container in your fridge with really old Chinese food in it. Those three types of plastics cannot be recycled together. So really, by design, plastic recycling doesn't work. That's why our plastic recycling rate in the US is only 5 to 6%. The people who know this are the plastic industry. They have spent millions of dollars putting the little recycling logo on plastic packaging, spending lots of money on advertising, saying, don't worry about all your single-use plastic, just toss it in the recycling bin, knowing full well that most plastics don't really get recycled. And it's so serious that in September of 2024, California Attorney General Rob Bonta sued ExxonMobil for making deceptive claims about plastics recycling and chemical recycling. We all know the courts are slow, but I'm pretty confident that the Attorney General is going to win that lawsuit because it's all about math.
Wow. So let's turn to another subject that you address in the book, and that's how packaging manufacturers have redefined composting from a soil health issue to a waste disposable technique known as bioplastics. Can you discuss the problems with bioplastics, pros
Sure.
and cons?
Yeah, sure. I love talking soil health. So, a lot of people don't want to use single-use plastics, and companies know this, but unless we adopt new laws to address this, they're just going to keep using it. Because for Amazon and McDonald's and Procter and Gamble, they think plastic is their cheaper option. Of course, it's not cheap when you look at the ecological and health impacts. But some companies have shifted to using so-called bio-based plastics or compostable plastics. There are real problems. On one hand, I appreciate that people are thinking differently and trying to do something, but often those so-called compostable plastics contain PFAS chemicals and other chemicals, and they only really get composted if they go to high temperature commercial composting facilities. So don't put that material in your backyard compost bin if you have one, especially if you're going to use the compost to grow food in your garden. Um, this is, it's well intentioned, but it doesn't work well often. And I like the way you frame this question, Wenonah, because if you do composting right, meaning strictly limit it to yard waste and food waste,
Yeah.
it's a soil amendment. It's also a carbon sink. But
Right.
once you start tossing in Starbucks cups and food wrappers, you turn composting into a waste disposal strategy. And there are a lot of composters who don't want that in their compost. There used to be a outdoor composting facility near Bennington, Vermont, and so I would bring my students over to look. It was the traditional windrows, and we would always find like compostable forks, fully formed, still in the heaps of compost. And that's not what farmers want to use.
No, that's for sure. So I know that, like all of us at Food and Water Watch, you and your staff at Beyond Plastics are really firm believers in people power and using people power to achieve our goals. So, can you talk about your work, what you're doing to combat the plastic crisis, and what you see for the future and how we're going to achieve our goals?
Yeah, so I'm actually optimistic about the future. Half of all plastic ever produced is since the year 2007. So that's contemporary. That's the year the iPhone was created. So we can turn the tide on plastic pollution. Facts are important, and most of the staff at Beyond Plastics are policy wonks. We read reports, we get excited about new scientific papers, we love talking to scientists. We just hired our first science director, um, Dr. Tricia Vendanathan. But facts alone don't move the needle. As you know, if it was just about facts, we would have solved the climate crisis by now. So we are really interested in building the grassroots movement against plastic pollution from the bottom up. So we do a lot of the things that Food and Water Watch does, educational webinars. We also do regular trainings on Zoom. We have one coming up starting Saturday We do quarterly trainings, and we also instituted something a few years ago called local groups and affiliates. So if you are with an existing group, you can become an affiliate of Beyond Plastics, or you can create Beyond Plastics Brooklyn, Beyond Plastics Greater Boston, for instance. We now have about 189 local groups and affiliates around the country. These are all volunteers, fantastic people who just want to do something on the plastic issue. And most of it is local, and then we go up to state policy. And currently, we're just playing whack-a-mole with the federal government, but at some point, we hope to have the opportunity to have a real impact at the national level.
Well, Judith, we're looking forward to continuing to work with you. And congratulations so much on the book and on all the work you and your staff are doing. So we wanted to save some time for audience questions. I know people have a lot of them because they've been sending them in. And so Jeanine has been monitoring the question box too. And we want to take a few of those now. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeanine.
Thanks, Wenonah. Those are great questions.
Thank you so much, Wenonah, for those great thought-provoking questions. And thank you to everyone here for submitting your questions to Judith. I know a lot of people are asking questions about what you can do when it comes to plastic pollution. And unfortunately, I likely will not get to every single question you're asking Judith, but I do want to share 3 quick but important answers from us here at Food and Water Watch. First of all, we have a microplastics volunteer team that meets monthly over Zoom on Tuesdays, and we're always looking for more volunteers. So if you'd like to join or are interested in learning more about that, please reach out to our senior organizer, Nisha Swinton. And Nisha is putting her email address in the chat right now, and she can answer any questions you have about joining the microplastics team. These volunteers are a mighty force, and they have they're such a great example of this people power and collective action that Judith and Wenonah are talking about. Our microplastics volunteer team recently had a really big win. They got 7 state governors to deliver a game-changing petition to the EPA demanding official monitoring of microplastics under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So if you'd like to join this work, please consider reaching out to Nisha, and please consider donating today to help add to our momentum on this important cause. And lastly, we are putting a link to a petition in the chat right now, so you can also add your voice demanding the EPA monitor microplastics. So these are 3 really direct ways you can take action that I would love to see from every one of you. And a huge thank you to everyone who already has. And with that, let's get to some more of your questions for Judith. I am going to pull some up here. Judith, we have a lot of questions about finding alternatives to plastic, and some of them are personal use questions, such as, food wrapped in plastic and clothes and disposing of cat litter and dishwasher pods, and some of them are asking about alternatives for PVC pipes and medical devices, and asking if there are any safe plastic products. So I know that's a lot of questions in once that I'm just throwing your way, but I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about this idea of alternatives to plastic and what our priorities there should be.
Sure. Read the book. There's a lot in the book. Toward the end, we have a little checklist of what you can do in your own kitchen. Look, we don't have choices a lot on avoiding plastic. I buy it sometimes because I don't have a choice when I go to my supermarket. So I urge people to look at what you use the most in terms of plastic, particularly in your kitchen. So if you drink coffee every morning and you make it from that little pod, the plastic K-cup, get rid of that, because you don't want that hot water going through the plastic and you're drinking it every morning. There are ways to make your coffee without so much plastic. Just look at your heaviest use of plastic, particularly for food and beverage. The easiest alternatives are paper, cardboard, metal, and glass. They exist, and they can be made from recycled material. And when you put it in your recycling bin, there's a really good chance that it will get recycled, unlike most plastic. Um, don't beat yourself up over it. We do the best we can. There's a wonderful saying from a woman who is the zero waste chef. Her name is Anne Marie Bonneau, Bonneau. And Anne Marie has said, we don't need a small number of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need a large number of people doing zero waste imperfectly. And that applies to plastic. So do the best you can. No plastic shaming. However, if you are pregnant or thinking of getting pregnant, you really want to toss out a lot of the plastic in your kitchen, and definitely black plastic, because most of that is made from recycled electronic waste. And you really want to pay attention to plastic in terms of reproductive toxins.
Yeah, thank you. I know we're also seeing plastic turf pop up at public schools and public parks. Tell us your thoughts about this.
This is like so ridiculous. Um, Grass is okay for your park, for your playing field, for your backyard, but a big industry has emerged selling plastic grass or plastic turf. And it used to be for sports fields because they said, the season lasts longer, it doesn't require as much maintenance. Now we're seeing it in more and more public parks. And I even heard a commercial to get it installed in your own backyard to replace grass. So the problems are a lot of this plastic turf or plastic grass contains toxic chemicals, including PFAS. Um, Second, it's really not good for wildlife. It's not good for soil health. It's not good for drainage. We're with climate change, we're getting more intense rainstorms, more rain coming down over shorter periods of time. And you want natural turf to help with flooding. And then, as I've spoken to some local officials who were considering whether or not to install this plastic grass, the issue that I think moved them almost more than the PFAS and the chemicals is the fact that it's really hot. So, we're seeing increasing temperatures every year and student athletes getting burned by this plastic turf. And so, like, why would you want your kid or your grandchildren spending any time on this when they could just be playing sports or running around a park on real grass?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to turn to recycling for a minute. You talk a lot about recycling, and you've mentioned that a lot of things that we think we're recycling don't actually get recycled. So aside from bottles, should we stop recycling plastic?
Yes, that is quite the internal debate we are having at Beyond Plastics. I still recycle number one and number two plastic. So that's soda bottles, milk jugs, detergent containers. Um, don't recycle, film plastic or polystyrene. I really only do number one and number two, which you can, flip over and see the tiny little number on the bottom of the container. Stay tuned on what we might say in the future on all plastic recycling. We are carefully looking at this. I'm at this point, I'm not ready to say stop recycling number one and number two plastic.
Good to know. Okay, a number of questions here along these lines. How can we convince or incentivize industry to be better about using less packaging and packaging more sustainably?
We can't. We've been trying to do that for decades, and companies are using more and more and more plastic. So, what we need to do is adopt new laws. Just like we have fuel efficiency standards for cars, we need environmental standards for packaging. So that's why in places like New York, we're working in coalition on the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, which Food and Water Watch is supporting. which requires a 30% reduction in um, plastic packaging over 12 years, eliminates the most toxic chemicals in packaging, puts a modest fee on packaging with that money going to local governments to support waste reduction, refill, and recycling programs, and then does not allow the false solution of chemical recycling to count as real recycling. So we have to pass laws. We're not going to get good laws through this Congress, so we must work at the state and local level. Just yesterday, in his last moments of being governor, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed the wonderful skip the stuff law in New Jersey. I think the fourth state to do this. So when you order takeout food, and you know how you always say, don't put utensils and straws and napkins in, and they always do. Going forward now in New Jersey next year, and in current law in New York City, the default is you don't get that unless you ask for it. And so that'll also save restaurants money, and we can liberate the drawers in our kitchens that have mountains of plastic forks that we're never going to use.
That's great. Um, of course, many people, probably all people on this call are activists and want to be doing something to make this better. And so there are a number of calls about how best to do that. One of them is saying, for example, that they are writing letters and making calls, but they just kind of get a form response. Do you have any advice on how to be more effective?
Yeah, that's why we do quarterly trainings. Letters definitely help. Calling lawmakers helps. Get in the political arena. I mean, what I observe is there are a lot of people want to reduce plastic in their own lives, and there are many good ways to do that. Everything from reusable coffee mugs to I'm experimenting with um, shampoo bars to avoid plastic shampoo bottles. I typically don't pay a lot of attention to my hair, so this is like really exciting for me. And they all work pretty well. Um, so, look at the plastic in your own life to protect your health and to protect your family's health. And then look at your kid's school or your grandkids' kids' school. What's going on in their cafeteria? Are they heating food in black plastic? Are they serving food on polystyrene trays? If so, go become a school activist and get that changed. Look at civic organizations, look at your faith community, get them to use real dishes in the kitchen. And then before you know it, you're at your city council meeting, your county legislature meeting, and you climb the ladder of activism. There is always something to do. On our website, beyondplastics.org, and also in the book, we have model local and state laws. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And for goodness sakes, don't do it alone. Do it with Food and Water Watch, do it with environmental groups, because you're going to have a greater impact and it's going to be more fun. I do want to warn people, it is a long haul. You're not going to get major change in 6 months. It's going to take a couple years, but you're going to learn a lot. You're going to be a democracy warrior, and you're going to have good models for when we finally, in the future, have a federal government that will get serious about environmental protection.
Yeah. Thank you, Judith. Unfortunately, we are up against time here. So I guess, is there anything else you want to leave us with before we close out this session?
I would just say buy the book for your local public library. It's available in all bookstores. All proceeds go to Beyond Plastics. It doesn't line my pocket. And lots of good information on our website, beyondplastics.org. And finally, I want to say it is an honor working with Food and Water Watch. I work with a lot of your staff in New York in particular, Eric Weltman, Laura Schindel. I've worked with Alex Beecham before he left New York, Jim Walsh, Mitch. Food and Water Watch staff are really good. They are good at two things. They know the facts and they know how to pull the levers of government. So it's not academic, it's in the arena, it's getting things done. And volunteering with groups like Food and Water Watch and Beyond Plastics really makes a difference. So we got a lot of work to do in a short period of time. Jump in. It'll be kind of exciting and frustrating, and it'll be kind of fun and disappointing. It's like real life. It's ups and downs, and we need all of you in this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Judith. I really, really appreciate it. Please join me in thanking Judith and Wenonah tonight for all of the great questions that you all brought and for everything Judith is doing to make this work happen. Judith, thank you again for your time, and thank you for writing such an engaging and informative book on this issue that touches every one of us every day.
Thank you. And thanks for picking the book, Wenonah. I'm honored. Good night.
Good night. Before you all go, I have a few closing announcements and reminders. First, as we've been saying, we will continue to work towards a future free of unnecessary plastic, and we will keep fighting for more plastic regulation and a livable future for all. We are up against big challenges, but like you, we are invested, and we will continue with big wins like the recent governor's EPA microplastics petition. If you would like to increase the impact we can have, please consider making a donation today. We don't take any corporate funding, so we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you, and a gift today will help us continue to do this important work. And if you would like to learn more about our work, you can register right now to join us for our next Livable Future Live event, our February discussion, The State of Food and Water 1 Year In. And lastly, please consider taking a short survey that will pop up on your screen in just a minute. I would love to know what you thought of this event, how we could make it even better, and what kind of speakers and topics you'd like to hear from and about in the future. And as a bonus, I will be sending out a copy of Judith's book, The Problem with Plastic, to 5 of you who fill out the survey today. Thank you again for joining me tonight. Please watch your email inboxes. I'll be sending out the recording of this event tomorrow, along with all of the resources that we shared tonight. Take care and see you next time.